Sorry, the number you have reached is not in service. Please check the number or try your call again. This is a recording.
What's up, everybody? Yeah, well, you know what? It's time for another Q&A. I know, I am getting sick, as I'm sure you are, of seeing my face and hearing my nasally voice on these films. Now, there is good news. In the last 24 hours, I did a complete webinar, start to finish. I did 3 new films, 1 for Blurb, 2 for me, and the 2 for me do not have my face or my voice in them at all. They're 2 new style of films that I did. One is called Anatomy of a Portrait, and one is called Not Good Enough. And I think you're going to like them. I think they're different, and for me, they're actually films about photography, my style of photography, photo education, whatever you want to call it. I think they're going to be good, and then I'm getting ready to get on the road for a nice long stretch, and I will be making films from the road, hopefully. There is so much up in the air right now, it's kind of hard to imagine. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions on One Man with One Opinion. On a couple of just brief side notes before we get started, read Jane Goodall's new book, Hope, which I found interesting. I wouldn't say that I have great hope in my fellow man. I really don't. There's too much to prove me wrong if I was to be hopeful. However, I read books like that because it is fun to be around people who are hopeful, who see the world as a glass half full, and or even people who see life through rose-colored glasses. And also, Under a White Sky, another really good book. And by the way, I'm writing blog posts about these on my site. Each book I break down. This is from the woman who wrote The Sixth Extinction, which she won a Pulitzer Prize for. This is really good. It's about sort of the future of nature. And again, if you're prone to pessimism, may want to skip those because there's some pretty naughty information in there. And finally, lo and behold, dun dun dun, dun dun dun, this could be good. AG23 is on kind of a hiatus because our primary sponsor, one of the 2 partner companies, is no longer a part of the project, but we got 2 amazing issues out before that happened, and now I am secretly scheming and scamming to get Blurb more involved without being involved. Think about Bruce Lee. When they ask him, hey, what's your style? And he says, my style, it's the art of fighting without fighting. That is exactly what I'm doing with AG23. It makes no sense to me that Blurb is not more involved, and my job is to get them more involved without becoming involved. And for anyone who works in a marketing department, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Alrighty then, let's get started. Now, this is a bizarre Q&A because I think there were a grand total of 2 people who sent me questions. Let me rephrase that. 1 million people sent me questions and send questions on a daily basis, but basically these 2 people sent like 5 questions in one. And so they kind of, you know, they elbowed their way in with massive numbers of questions. And so I think I'm only going to answer the questions of 2 people, but they've each got like 5 apiece. So I'm going to try to get through this quickly. And they're interesting. They're questions that are a little bit different than what we've had before. And I like that, and it also references a couple of really good photographers that you may or may not know. So let's dive in before we go crazy, and you know, before things start to come undone. She's come undone. All right, question number 1. I live in Seattle. Good for you. I might be traveling to Seattle in the coming months. I've admired the work of Michael Kenna since around '99 when I was shown a copy of his 20-year retrospective. I have 2 Michael Kenna prints on the wall at my casita, by the way. Not this house, but the other one. I was reminded recently that he also lives in Seattle. That I did not know. Would it be ridiculously uncouth of me to contact him through his personal address as opposed to going through a local gallery to ask for a chance to get a book signed and just express my appreciation for his work in person? As I type this, I recognize the potential stalker bent the question raises, but I have purely honest intentions. The short answer is no, it shouldn't bother him at all, especially if you're reaching out to get a book signed, which means that you've already purchased one of his books. Now, I've met him once or twice, and it's been many years since this went down. I think it was here in Santa Fe, actually. Really, really nice guy. I mean, cool guy, nice guy, easy to talk to, no ego, kind of a rarity in the professional photography world, actually. Not to say that there aren't other people like him, but he was very cool to be around. And I remember talking to him about his technique of how he worked in the field and like leaving a Hasselblad in the middle of nowhere with a timer on and driving to a cafe somewhere and eating dinner while the thing is making these exposures and then driving back to get it. My camera would get stolen in 8 seconds, but somehow he's able to pull it off. I found him to be a super approachable guy. And look, if someone is upset that you reach out to him to get a book signed, these aren't people that you would want to support anyway. There's no point in going through life and supporting people or being around artists who aren't comfortable to be around. And I know that's crazy because some of the superstars in photography in the art world are notoriously difficult people. But I don't know about you. I'm 53 now. I'm not 23. At 23, maybe I put up with someone being abrasive. At 53, forget it. The number of shows and exhibitions and industry events I go to now, I can count on one hand all year long. I used to go multiple times a week. I'd go every weekend, either gallery shows or museums or whatever. Now I go to the Natural History Museum because everybody's dead and I don't have to deal with them at all because they've been dead for centuries. I'm looking at their bones and the ephemera of what their body looked like when it was scattered across the prairie. That's the kind of thing I'm doing now. I don't think he would have a problem with it. The only wrinkle I could see is that you may or may not get something back. Not everybody responds. Doesn't make them horrible people, but oftentimes too, if you're successful, the volume of email and messaging and communications you have on a daily basis means that some things are going to fall through the cracks. So you ultimately may have to end up going back through the gallery anyway, just to get to them. Okay, second question from the same person. What about those of us that are hobbyists? Now, I think this was a right turn. Right turn, Clyde. My current career is in construction. Smart. There is no lack of that in America right now. But I was once slogging through the formal BFA route. Well then, the BFA route, Bachelor of Fine Arts, that's what I have. Not really. I have a Bachelor of Journalism. I didn't finish. I dropped out of that and joined the Army. Again, smart move. Army is going to give you an experience that is going to lay a foundation for your journalism or your photography in the future that you would not be able to get any other way. I think many of us would like photography to at least pay for itself. So in that regard, should I fire up a web page? I'm blown away by the myriad of paths to self-publishing that exist right now. I guess I could get off my behind, edit a group together, and put a 4-issue run together for my family. That would be something at least. All right, so I told you, everyone's snaking in like 3, 4, 5 questions at a time. I like your style. That's like as a kid, when someone said, hey, do you want a piece of candy? And you were like, yeah. And then you like snaked a handful. By the way, I stole one time when I was little. I was probably in like 2nd grade. We lived in Indiana, out in the middle of nowhere. There was a little intersection, country intersection, and there was a store, like a country store. And they had these giant baskets that were at floor level that wrapped all the way around the inside of the store, and each one of them was filled with a hard candy, like a long cylindrical hard candy in every flavor you could possibly imagine. Now, I walk in as a 2nd grader, and I see these baskets at my height, my level, and in my little brain, I was like, oh, this entire place was built for me, for my candy consumption. And I proceeded to just start digging, man. I went from basket to basket, and I was just stuffing every pocket I had. I walked out like this, and got into the car, and we were driving home. My parents somehow missed all this. I'm telling you, I was loaded for bear. I was like a miner in the 1890s hiking over the hills in Alaska. I was saddled down with so much stolen candy. And we're driving home in the car, and I'm just ripping these things one at a time, crunching through them. And my mom looks in the rearview mirror and says, where did you get that candy? And approximately a half second later, I just burst into tears and started crying and gave up. I completely folded. Mom turned the car around, drive back. I had to walk of shame. I go in there like a convict, and I have to admit my guilt and my sin. And thankfully, the person didn't, pull out a gat or anything. They were basically like, it's okay, cool, kid, take it. And in my head, I was like, crime pays. So anyway, for those of you who are dabbling in photography, who think you want photography to pay, I think you're going down a really bad road. Just enjoy your photography. The second you try to make money from it, and there are exceptions to this, and here's the weird thing about photography. I know people who work full-time as photographers now. Their work is not good. Their business isn't particularly well run. They don't make a lot of money. They have no knowledge or context or the history of photography. They don't have any knowledge and really any desire to know any of that. But what they are is thrilled, absolutely wildly thrilled to not be doing what they were doing before they became photographers. Let me repeat that. If you work in the dead letter department at the post office and you've been in there for 30 years sitting in a windowless room in the back sorting through dead letters, and someone comes to you and says, "Hey, do you want to shoot Little League Baseball for a living?" You're like, "Yeah, maybe. I've never worked in the dead letter department at the post office, but I've heard stories about it, and it doesn't seem particularly endearing in my mind. I don't know. There's someone out there who's tailor-made for that job. It's not me." So I know a lot of photographers who have come to photography because they were in really undesirable careers before, and they saw photography and said, "I don't really care what I have to do in photography or how I have to do it. It's better than what I was doing before." I don't want to be in that category. You know, photography to me has so much meaning and relevance in my life, even though I don't really do it that much anymore, and I don't do it for a living, and I don't really care about sharing what I'm doing. But when you turn the tap of from fun to pay, it changes everything about photography, all of it. And all of a sudden, this thing that you love now comes with a cloak of pressure and clients and fickleness and customers and demands and people. People are crazy now. Crazy is perfectly acceptable. All those reality TV shows running on cable 24 hours a day, the behavior of our politicians, all of that stuff, the behavior of everyday people, it's gotten so out of control, and with it has come in a level of acceptance of that behavior that just makes everything not as fun as you think it's going to be. I do know exceptions. I know people who are like on Instagram get paid to do posts here and there. Some people at a very high level, and most other people are making a little trickle. If you're okay with that, I guess. But my advice is to just keep doing your construction job and then work on your photography on the side. Work on getting good. Because if you get good at photography, people will find you and come to you, and then the balance is shifted where you have the power as a creative and can dictate what you do, how you do it, and for how much. That's really the only way to go into photography in my mind, is if you've already established a level of quality of work that transitions the power from client to you. You want to be the one dictating and not them. I know, not all clients are evil. There's a handful out there that are darn fine. All right, should you start a web page? Well, a web page is fine, but you're not going to just turn it on and all of a sudden a bunch of revenue comes flying in. It's just the website is a long play. A career is a long play. And so take your time and enjoy it and get good first, and then decide. In the interim, absolutely start a web page, create a web page, and create a really beautiful place to be able to showcase your work. And yes, self-publishing. Here's the thing about self-publishing. It still has a stigma attached to it, right? Professional photographers in particular are notorious for like casting all kinds of shade on self-publishing. Oh, you're a loser, you couldn't get a publishing deal, so you're going to self-publish. Oh, that's not real publishing. Oh, that's not a real book, that's a blur book. I've heard this literally for 12 years. There's a lot of lame people running around, let's just face that. Because the same person that will look at you and say, oh, self-publishing, what a joke, you couldn't get a publisher. That same person will turn around and pay a publisher $30,000 to $50,000 up front to get a book deal and somehow not consider that self-publishing. That happens all the time. That is one of the dumbest, craziest, most idiotic notions I've ever heard in my life, and I've been hearing it almost on a daily basis for 12 years. It's lunacy, but yet that's the way it is. It's still considered that way. Publishing, self-publishing. Photographers were self-publishing before they were publishing because there were no traditional photo book publishers when photographers first started publishing. Think about that. Think about the novelists, the famous novelists, Charles Dickens, all those. They were self-publishing too. So if you feel that self-publishing has a stigma, and I know that's not your question, but a lot of you do, that's baggage on you. Because the examples of wonderful self-published work have been going on for decades. And if you want to ignore it, go ahead and ignore it, but do it at your peril. The other thing that rubs me wrong, thank you for asking what bothers me about self-publishing, especially on social, is the chatter. Chatter, chatter, chatter. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I know people who've been chattering and talking trash about what they're going to do in self-publishing for over 2 years who haven't even yet made a sample book. If you're talking trash about what you're going to do and you haven't made anything, shut up. Just stop talking. Turn off your social media, turn off the internet, and go into the field and make something decent. This drives me nuts because when you're on social, and especially if you work for a brand or you work for any sort of company or you work for an agency or you're working on contract for a big organization, whatever it is, everybody that has a social media presence as a brand or company has to respond to what happens on their social media feed. So these people who chirp will always tag. I'll tag this brand and that brand. Here's what they do. They sit around all day long tweeting and tagging brands, forcing the brands to respond. And these people who are doing this are hoping that the brands are going to reach out and investigate who they are and say, wow, gee, this guy's a genius. I think we should reach out and offer to sponsor him and give him free stuff. That's what their mindset is. And it's completely delusional because inside the brand is saying, why are you tagging me? I don't know you. We have no relationship. Unless you're bringing something to my attention that's either relevant to the business or there's an issue that's happening. But just this casting, this fishing nonstop drives everybody crazy. And the truth is that those people never make anything. The people who make the best work, you rarely hear anything from them. And you know why that is? Because they're making work. They're not sitting around on social media all day long. They're not sitting around crying wolf all day long. They're out making the best work you've ever seen. That's the category of person you want to be in. And yes, the public service announcement is now over. All right, this just came out of nowhere. This is maybe the third person. So there's 2 people that ask a myriad of questions, and then there's one person who just snuck a single one-liner in the middle. Whoever you are, good on you. Why, this is question number 3, I think. Why don't I miss the photojournalism industry? Where do I begin? I don't miss being a photographer at all. 0. I think this was something that took at least 5 years for my friends and peers to come to grips with. This really took a while. Because when I went from being a photojournalist to a wedding photographer, a lot of my... Sorry. I had a little stray event just happened there. I don't know what that was. I could cut it out, but you know what? We share everything here. When I went from being a photojournalist to a wedding photographer, a lot of people talked trash to me. Oh, you're a loser. Oh, you couldn't make it. Oh, you do that. Oh, you must be horrible if you're shooting wedding. Blah, 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 blah. All the talk, all the scarves and dressed in black and acting all moody that was happening in photojournalism. 99.9% of all those people are gone and out of business. I looked and said, you know what? I'm going to make more money in one day than you're going to make all year. And I don't really care about being a photojournalist anymore. When I left photography and took a job with Blurb, the same thing happened. Quite a few people reached out and said, what are you doing? You have this successful career as a photographer. You must be like taking a step backwards, or I can't believe you would do this. And I'm like, if you can't see the writing on the wall of what's happening in the professional photo industry and the fact that it's a mature business that's in decline, majorly in decline, and then you see what's happening with social media and the devaluation of everything associated with this industry, and everyone's just drunk on this technology thinking that likes and following is some sort of sign of quality of work. Delusion. I saw this early on and said, I see the path of where photography is going, and I want to go this way as fast as humanly possible. And I did. I don't miss the photo industry at all, whether it is the wedding industry or editorial or commercial or photojournalism. And it wasn't like I was some icon or huge part of the photojournalism industry. I never was. I worked in photojournalism for years. I made some decent pictures from time to time. I did some decent assignments, and I did a ton of crap. In fact, one of the most famous outlets for photojournalism in the United States, this was brought to my attention a couple of days ago on a long phone call with a very famous photojournalist who called, and we've talked a couple of times now in the past couple of weeks. He's a friend, longtime friend, and we talk about things I would never share here because they're really, really, really personal. But I'd forgotten about this. I was called by one of these institutions to do an assignment that was completely and utterly unethical. And I said to the photo editor on the phone, what you are asking me to do is completely unethical and basically against every standard of journalism that I went to school to study, to find out, to make sure that I didn't fracture these things. And this guy on the phone said, yep, absolutely, I totally get it. And if you don't do this, guess what? You're not going to work for us anymore. And I was like, well, I guess I'm not working for you anymore. So journalism was in decline when I started in the program. So I caught the very tail end of what I would consider the golden era of photojournalism, getting a job, getting an internship at a newspaper, and then spending all that time, years on and off at big newspapers, freelancing for wire services, freelancing editorial, doing that kind of stuff. The vast majority of that is gone now for people. If I had come up today, all of those paths are gone. So journalism to me was really in decline and transition. And it's not to say there aren't great photojournalists out there. There are. There are tons of them. You might not see their work. You may have to look in Japan or Europe or South America or somewhere like that to see this work. There's a few outlets left in the US, but again, I wasn't like some icon that was getting A++ assignments every day and saying, geez, I'm on top of the photojournalism world. I also, too, made the realization that I was not as interested in the journalism side. I was interested in the documentary side. For example, if you looked at the situation that happened in Rwanda and Burundi back when the massacres happened, you had multiple different styles of photographer on the scene. You had guys like Jim Nachtwey, who is arguably the most important photojournalist in the modern era. But you also had guys like Salgado running around. And Salgado was not known as a peak action spot news photographer. Salgado was looking at Rwanda as a long play and saying, first of all, what's the history of this region? How could this possibly happen? He's there, trying to be there before and staying long after. Where Nachtwey's role is like, this stuff is going down now. He is a frontline, peak action photojournalist covering war and famine for the last, 40 or 50 years. The guy's insane. If you haven't seen his books, Deeds of War and what's the giant one called? I have 2 copies of it around here. Inferno, that's the other one. And Salgado has a gazillion books out as well. I'm jealous. I hate both of them. Just kidding. His Africa book is the last one that I bought. I don't have Genesis. I can't even look at it. I can't even stomach to look at it because the guy drives me crazy in the best possible way. When you're looking at the work of these guys, if it doesn't make you want to get into the field and make work, then I don't know, you might want to check your pulse because you might have already died. So anyway, that's why I don't miss the industry. And there's probably 30 other reasons why I don't either. Okay, question 4. I was recently introduced to Luke DeLahaye's book, Winter Ice. It's fascinating and so is the story. After feeling uninspired, a friend suggested he go visit Russia. So in the midst of the Russian 1990s recession, and by the way, Luke DeLahaye's a Magnum photographer, he and a friend, a translator, got on the Siberian Railway and traveled from town to town. They would randomly knock on doors to find places to eat and stay. DeLahaye took 1 camera, 1 lens, a Contax G2 and a 35, which tells you that he is not only is he a major risk taker photographically, and oh, by the way, DeLahaye had what I would call a second chapter of his career that was very intelligent and very smart, which was more photojournalism based, but also bridging the gap between photojournalism and the actual real fine art world, which is a whole separate story. But the Contax G2, the autofocus, sucked. So you're going to go all that way over there. That camera was like, how would I describe it? That camera would be like, remember when Matt Dillon in Drugstore Cowboy, when they rob the pharmacy and they sort of end up with a box of vials and they're not entirely sure what's in them and they just start like, phew. A friend of mine did that in town here too. Back in the day, he was a heroin addict. and they broke into a pharmacy and stole this box of vials, and they didn't know what was in it. And he said, we took turns sitting around in a house just shooting what was in these vials. And he said one guy across from him shot this thing in, and his hair started standing up, and it was like adrenaline that he'd shot himself with. That's kind of what it was like using the Contax G2. It could be your best friend, or it could be your worst enemy. Apparently, DeLahey used the cheapest film available to him, Fuji Superia, which led to some beautiful, unnatural colors in the book, lots of reds, pinks, and greens. The question: when starting new projects like this, one of the hardest and most daunting things to do is approach strangers. Have you ever approached a project like this, simply knocking on doors and starting conversations with the hopes of being invited in or having a bed for the night? Any pearls of wisdom on how to do this respectfully? That is all I ever did. All I ever did was do projects about people and do projects about people that I did not know. And that included getting in the car or train or plane and going somewhere and just going into the field and starting to meet people. And people would allow me to do things that you cannot believe they would allow me to do. They allowed me to photograph illegal activity. They allowed me to be in the middle of domestic disputes in their house where I was like translating and keeping people separated. You cannot believe where the camera will lead you. Now, this, I have to go back because this was starting in the early 90s and the world was a different place. There was no internet, there was no digital, there were no mobile phones. When someone saw you in the field with a camera, the camera was this positive thing. People would say, oh, and if you had a press credential, that meant that you were vetted by a professional organization. The press credential said, that guy's been trained. That guy is neutral. That guy I can trust. People were much more likely to let you in their houses then than now. Now people are skeptical, and rightly so, because there's a lot of knuckleheads running around with mobile phones, and there's a lot of knuckleheads running around with cameras trying to get famous and doing stupid stuff that makes it more difficult for everyone else to go in the field. So you have to talk to people. And the thing is, if you're a reportage photographer, the idea is you don't control or orchestrate the scenes that you're in. Sometimes you're allowed to just waltz into a scene or a house or a building or whatever situation you find yourself in, and without saying a word, it is implied or inferred that you are okay, that you're there, they know you're there, there's a sort of unspoken acknowledgement, and you can begin to work. Other times you walk in and know very quickly, I cannot be here without getting permission or I'm going to get my ass handed to me. And so you have to have dialogue. That's where your elevator pitch comes in. You have to be able to explain what you're doing concisely and in terms that those people will understand. That is why I carry a printed field guide with me always when I'm doing projects, so that when someone says, hey, who are you? What are you doing here? All I do is hand them the field guide and say, this is what I'm working on. That shows immediately that you're not an Instagrammer, you're not a tourist, and you're not a looky-loo. That elevates your position on the scale, and that's very important. You also have to be prepared to hear no, especially these days. And no sometimes comes in a very violent way. Could be verbally violent, could be physically violent. I've had my share of issues with law enforcement over the years. I've had my share of issues with people that I was trying to photograph that got pissed off. I've had people ram my car. I've had people shoot at me, not directly at me necessarily, but definitely in my direction because of the people that I was with. That's just a part of doing this kind of job. So DeLahey's a pro. I mean, to get into Magnum, you've been doing this for a while. You've done it successfully again and again, which is what an organization like that is going to look for in a photographer, is someone who can not only produce an amazing body of work, but then can turn around and go out in the field and do it again. Anyone can produce. You know, we've all heard the term one-hit wonder, whether it's music or a football team or whatever. It's the people it's the Patriots. It pains me to say that. Pains me to bring it up as a Saints fan. Anything positive about the Patriots. I don't like the Patriots, but you got to admit, pretty damn good. Here's a better example, and one that'll make us all feel nice and chummy. The San Antonio Spurs. All the whining LA Laker fans, the fair weather fans, probably the worst fair weather fans I've ever seen are in Los Angeles, although Phoenix is a rival, at least back in the day. They were pretty close. If you're a Saints fan, it's like someone taking a 2x4 and hitting you in the medulla oblongata every year at the beginning of the season. Wham! And then you lose all your motor skills. And when you come to, the only thing you can think of is, well, we got next year. The Patriots and the Spurs The Spurs were a dynasty, but because they were a small market team and they weren't sexy and their star was quiet and was never in trouble, they hardly ever, it was a reluctant praise from the media. It was always like, yeah, the Spurs are great again, but you know what, the Lakers, and then the Lakers would have like, they would act like children and implode, and then the media would turn back and reluctantly cover the Spurs winning another championship. So to get into those organizations, you got to be good and you got to be consistent. You want to be a photo dynasty, my friends. All right. By the way, Luke DeLahey, the little second wrinkle, was covering the war in Afghanistan and making, this sounds crazy, making beautiful photographs from war. And then those photographs were then considered suddenly by the art world and sold in the art world. I'm not going to go into detail. That's a story. Let's see, your homework assignment is to research, and it could be Luke DeLahey, but I've always called him Luke DeLahey. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation at all. I've never met him, never talked to him, don't know him. And Superia, this is the subcategory question of whatever he was asking about. Talking about Superia film. For my research, is a sunlight balanced film. DeLahey, however, seemed to use it prominently at night and indoors. So some of the images are red, and it looks like he's using some sort of red headlamp. The truth is that Luke DeLahey's work is good because the story is good. You know, the photographs are good, obviously, but the story is good. It doesn't matter that the images are, he didn't filter the light. He didn't gel up, he didn't filter his lens and gel the strobe and get daylight balanced images from using a color, daylight balanced film. Nobody at that level, in my mind, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but the specifics of like perfect color and all that stuff get thrown out the window. It's not that important. I've said this probably 5,000 times in the last 12 years doing blurb presentations. I have a little section about tips of getting started making books. I give like 8 what I consider helpful tips. And one of them is, once you've settled on your color, don't ever think about it again. Because the people who come to me obsessed over color in their blurb books never make good books. Their books are so boring because they forgot to make good photos, they forgot to tell a story, they forgot to do good design, they don't know anything about typography, and all they're doing is just obsessing over the fact that they have to have perfect color, and then they hold up their photo books to the window like this, and they look at the color and the detail, and they go, oh my God, I gotta see this. No one does that except other photographers. And if that is your audience, I suggest you get a new audience, because you're never going to be able to please photographers. They're going to just trash you no matter what. Eventually, someone in the crowd is going to burn you to the ground. Get an audience of like everyday people, number one. And two, everyday people don't care about your color. As long as it's in the ballpark, what they care about is being entertained and being shown great work and told a story that they don't know anything about. That's what they're jazzed about. So that's why Superia film, you could use old, outdated, color-shifted film and sort of pull it back towards neutral, and you'd be totally fine. Okay, now let me see. This could be a follow-up question, or it could be somebody else. Let me get through this here. This is the last question. Like deciding on film uses the process. Let me just try to sum this up here. Raw, but I'm stuck. Oh, it's about being decision paralysis before an assignment, or before doing, or even starting a project. So this person is saying like, I don't know which film to decide on, because once you decide on a film and you decide on a process, then the results are going to look the same for the entire film. And with digital, you can shoot raw, but then you're stuck with the idea that you can easily change things into the minutia level or whatever. Here's the problem, bud, whoever you are. And thank you again for everyone who sent these questions in. I think these are actually really good questions this week. Here's the thing, man. You're avoiding the actual photo part. Yeah, you're avoiding it. Decision paralysis is a first world problem. And it's a first world photographic problem. If you're in the world and your daily task list, your to-do list in the morning is find food, find water, find shelter, you're going to go out and be done. If you're a 1%er sitting in your penthouse and your broker called and said that your stocks are looking good and everything is fine, and all of a sudden the phone call ends and you don't really have anything on your agenda and you can do whatever you want, well, guess what? Now what do you do? That's the situation I'm in. I wish. You just got to go and start. What film you use and the look of that film is irrelevant for the most part, especially to the people in the photographs that you're doing. For the most part, I don't remember someone, a subject of mine, saying, oh, what are you rating your Tri-X at? 250? What are you going to run it in? D76 or HC110? They don't care. They're never going to care. They're like, why the heck are you photographing me? Just start shooting. It's the same thing I was talking about earlier with folks who are tweeting all day long. And then you're like, have you done anything? Yeah, I've tweeted all day long. That's what I've done. You don't want to be in that camp. You want to be the person, you want to be like Nick Taro in Albuquerque. I got another email from him yesterday. And he's like, here's my latest collaboration book. And I wrote him and said, damn it, did you do it again? And he just wrote back and said, can't stop, won't stop. That's the camp you want to be in. Just start. The rest of this stuff, I shoot digital all the time. And if you want to eliminate all the nonsense of what digital presents and puts in front of you, it's pretty simple. I have 2 presets total, and they're probably at least a decade old, both of them. I don't remember where I got them. They were free. 1 black and white and 1 color. That is the grand extent of my Lightroom work. Import, rank, as in star, the ones that I actually think are selects, select all, apply preset, export, leave. That is all I ever do. I don't sharpen. I don't do any of that stuff. You don't need to. The idea is the photograph is what matters, and you better learn how to make good ones, because if you don't, no one is going to pay attention if that is your primary goal. If you're making images for yourself and you make a little print at home and you look at it and you go, man, I had a great time making that picture, that's fantastic. And frankly, I think that's probably the best solution for most of us. But if you're out there and you're really adamant about getting known and having your work seen and doing all those things, then you better make really good photographs. And the technique of how those are made or how those are processed in post is almost irrelevant. Just start. And I know it's daunting. You just have to go out and be prepared to fall on your face and be prepared to come back and say, I didn't really get much today, but just keep going. That's what it's about. And look, if you get something good, one good thing, one tiny little success or victory, it's often enough to just empower you at a level to where it's like, you know what? Billy was on the edge there for a while, and now we just need to get out of the way because that boy's coming through like a Cat 5. That's who you want to be. All right, good questions. That's it. I'm going to make 17 more films today and maybe have some tea and do some other stuff, but that's really about it. I appreciate you being here, and I'll be back.
We're sorry, the number you have reached is not in service. Please check the number or try your call again. This is a recording.